All right, it looks like we are good to go. So thank you everyone for joining today's webinar, Stay Ahead of Product Innovation for Mobile. We will get started immediately. Just so you know, please use your computer audio for the best effect for listening, and then feel free to send any questions in the chat because we will be doing a Q&A at the end, and we would love to answer any questions that come up. I should have introduced myself. My name is Colin. I work at Embrace, and I'll be the MC today. And with that, let's kick it off, and I will hand it over to Megan.
Hey, thanks, Colin. Thanks, everyone, for joining the webinar that we have today. My name is Megan Winter. I'm the Director of Mobile Growth here at Embrace, based out of Chicago, so it's a little bit windy today, but sunny outside, which is nice. Once again, thank you for joining the webinar, but special thanks to all of our panelists joining. We're waiting on Ben. He'll join soon. Working from home, there's always an issue, right? All good. But why we host webinars at Embrace. So we're a mobile first company, and we want to help start those conversations within the mobile industry. We've come to realize, working in this space for over 4.5 years, that sometimes the mobile teams at companies are rather small. So what we're trying to do is spark that conversation, get people talking kind of internally, but also within other companies as well, to continue that innovation. Today, I'm super excited to host the product innovation webinar. Typically, our webinars are more engineering based, which is awesome. That's what our company does, but shifting gears a little bit to product side. So we have 3 amazing people here today, 2 right now, 1 will be joining. So wait and see who comes in. But why we're shifting to product in the first place is because as mobile increases, so does the competition in the space. There's more apps on your phone, but you know, it's heavily populated by all these apps. So we're trying to get you guys to stay ahead of product innovation. So today, I want to introduce 3 amazing product leaders in this space from 3 amazing companies. I'll let them introduce who they are, a little bit about their company, and fun surprise, your favorite Christmas movie. I know it's not even Thanksgiving yet, but I love Christmas. So if you can just share your favorite Christmas movie for people watching, you can drop yours in the chat. But we'll get started. Ren, I'll shoot it off to you, and then we'll go to Peter, and hopefully Ben joins next.
Thank you, Megan. Awesome. Hopefully everybody can hear me, and that's a great surprise question. There was not prepared for that. I'm going to start with that one because it's really fun. For me, favorite Christmas movie's got to be Home Alone. I don't think there's anything else that could beat that. But anyway, a little bit about myself. So my name is Ren. I'm leading the product team here at Cohesion. At Cohesion, we're building a building experience application, and that's built on kind of this idea of connecting all the systems and devices and people within office buildings. We're trying to collect data from that platform to create a much more modern and personalized experience for everyone in the building, especially for office employees. So that's a little bit about what Cohesion does. And I've only been here for about 5 weeks or so, so I'm very new to the company, but previous to that, I was at another prop tech platform that also used Embrace.
Awesome.
And I'm Peter Drinkwater. I work for Ancestry.com. My favorite Christmas movie probably has to be It's a Wonderful Life. We have a bit of a family connection to It's a Wonderful Life, so that was it. So I work as a product manager right now. I'm the director of product management in the Emerging Businesses Group, which is sort of an odd name, but it basically means websites that aren't Ancestry, that Ancestry owns. So the one that I'm working on right now is called Find a Grave, and it's a bit of an unusual site. It started in about 1995. A guy had a hobby to document famous people's graves, so he would go to them and collect samples, maybe. That's on down low, and then he would take pictures, and then so he built a website to sort of store this information, so you could know where you could find Jim Morrison's grave because he'd tell you how to get there, and then people would send him information about other famous people's graves. So it was an early crowdsourcing activity where over time it grew, and then people who weren't famous wanted to add their non-famous family as well. So it became a a source for genealogy information, and that's why Ancestry acquired it a few years ago. So it's a site with a long history and a lot of sort of intellectual and tech debt and those sorts of things that we're working to fix. But one of the ways that we've chosen to do that is through mobile, through an app, through some apps that we've built for the site. And so we can talk more about the details of what we do with those later. But so mobile's been nice for us to kind of help bring it forward. So
awesome. Thanks for the introductions. Ben's not on, correct, Colin?
I am here. I'm in audio.
Oh.
Having a permissions issue with the video. I apologize. It wouldn't be 2020 if we didn't have some sort of technical hiccup. I apologize.
All good. Yeah, take it away, Ben.
Ben Weiss here, Director of Product Management for Hyatt Hotels Corporation. And we are part of the digital arm that helps to enable all the great guest experiences on our properties, more than 1,000 properties around the globe. And my team thinks about everything really from check-in to check-out. And we focus very heavily on the World of Hyatt app and developing it for our members and to make the guest stay just that much better.
Awesome. And what's your favorite Christmas movie, Ben?
You know, so I grew up in a Jewish household, but I will say my grandfather loves A Christmas Story because it was based in the town where he grew up, and we watched that one pretty regularly. So that would have to be mine.
Awesome. I like to start it off with something fun. My favorite is White Christmas. It's a classic. My mom and I love to watch it on Christmas Day. We're just gonna go right into kind of the questions. So these questions can be kind of up for grabs for anyone. I'll start to kick it off, but if anyone wants to chime in and feedback off each other, feel free to. Within companies, we always have initiatives. We always have a roadmap that we're working towards. So I'd love to kind of learn about each of your mobile initiatives that you have right now, and maybe one specific one that's kind of the leader in those initiatives. So if anyone wants to start off, Ben, we'll just pass back to you. We'll start there, and then anyone can chime in after that.
Sure. You know, a big part of what we're focused on now are creating, you know, really great contactless guest experiences for obvious reasons, with, you know, the pandemic being, you know, front and center in everybody's travel experience. You know, we know that every milestone in that travel journey is impacted by what has taken place here in 2020. And you know, we're extremely conscious of that and want to build, you know, great tools to, you know, support social distancing. But at the same time, we also know that we don't want to just build things that are only useful in a pandemic. And we want to build those types of, you know, platforms and capabilities that will be useful in 22, 23 and beyond. So check-in is one of those areas where it's just something that is in desperate need of reinvention, where we can give guests the flexibility to do it, you know, wherever they are. And we do that to a certain degree, but with not as many people as we ideally want to. And our big effort is how do we enable everyone to be able to check in digitally and make that experience really robust, so that ultimately, if you want to completely bypass the front desk, that's the choice that you want to make for that trip, you can do that and be able to go all the way straight to your room. So that's a huge part of what we're building. And the mobile side really, you know, gives us just an incredible set of, you know, tools to pull off that experience in a really elegant and seamless way. And there's a lot with a check-in, right? You know, we're verifying who you are to make sure that you are the right person. We're dealing with payment, where it really touches on like everything from both a physical security side and from a payment security. It's like e-commerce and you know, all of, you know, the things in hospitality are kind of all in one. So it's a big thing to bite off, and we have some really great plans to make that experience just a lot better for guests and give them the control they want.
Awesome. I did, Ben, I don't know if I told you, I did use the World of Hyatt app over Labor Day weekend. I stayed out in Cincinnati and used the app, and it was great. Even the checkout process was seamless. So you guys are doing some great things over at Hyatt.
Glad to hear it. We got a whole lot more coming too.
Awesome. Peter or Ren, if you want to jump in and share some of your company's initiatives and what you're currently working on.
Yeah, I'd be happy to go.
Yeah.
So with Find a Grave, you know, we've got this large history of data, but one of the key pieces is people going out to these locations, to the cemetery itself, and documenting the information there. And so for us, the primary benefit of the app is being able to take advantage of some of the location services and the camera activities that are available through the app. And so a lot of our initiatives around that. So allowing people to leave a GPS pin where a grave is located, so that when a family member wants to come, they can just open their app and walk straight to it. It guides them to it, that sort of thing. taking a picture easily, uploading those pictures. So so for us, the app is really focused on the experience while you're out at the cemetery, more so than at home. So.
And Ren?
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Megan. So like I mentioned before, Cohesion, we're mainly serving office space, at least in the current moment. And kind of looking around here, I'm sure we have a lot of attendees that I can't see, but I would guess that not a lot of us are dialing in from the office right now. So we know that the future of work is going to change, and it's very different right now. So our initiatives very much reflect that. Because a lot of us will have kind of this hybrid work environment kind of arrangement in the future, we need a product that can definitely be flexible to the different usage contexts that people will have in the future. So mobile is a superior platform in a lot of ways because it can kind of create those habit forming behaviors from anywhere and any sort of context, right? Whether you're at home, you're on the train, or you're in an office, you're in an Uber, whatever that might be, mobile can be kind of this one-stop shop for you. You can use that product from anywhere. And one of the most compelling use cases that we have is to really, use your phone as a replacement for, the various things, like as you get into the office, like as a key card, or to, call an elevator once you're kind of standing in the lobby. So, going along with what Ben was saying in terms of a lot of touchless features. And I think, one other thing that's really, really exciting is, right now, obviously with COVID being on everyone's mind, people are unsure and they're sort of afraid of what they can't see. And our app can't tell you if there's COVID in your building or not, but we can tell you what the indoor air quality looks like in your building. So whether you're checking it at home before you go into the office in the morning to make sure it's safe, or you're in the office already and you just want kind of that peace of mind, we can kind of show you that the HVAC systems are working well and that air circulation is working well, and draw that kind of parallel to safety and give people peace of mind.
That's awesome. Safety is on top of everyone's priority list these days. So I think that's great. You're incorporating that into the app as well. So what I'm hearing is a lot of great initiatives, right? 3 different companies, 3 amazing people and product. How do you make that a reality? How do you work with the engineering teams to kind of divide and conquer those initiatives to make them a reality in the user's hand as they're actually using the app? Peter, I'll give it off to you. I think.
Right. Yeah.
Start with you.
Yeah. So we're fortunate in our group to we have sort of a dedicated team just for we have the team dedicated to the web. We have a team dedicated to iOS and to Android. So I guess it's not that dissimilar to what we're doing in other places. We use some standard tools that we use to write up features and to work through the process, help the guys work together. They're all guys. But in our case, they happen to be guys. Help them work together to make those things happen. We're really fortunate to have some app developers who are curious and who are interested. And I think that's a big part of it, is just their own interest in staying current and staying up to date and looking for ways to improve and push things. We, as a group, we all are involved with customer feedback and listening to customers, so they get that feedback. We also have a day a week where we go out and use the apps, separately. Sometimes we'll go out together. We used to, we don't now, but we'll go out and use them and together as a group and watch and sort of have a sort of feedback on that and see how it goes. So I think just knowing what other people are using the app for, and then using it ourselves and seeing what we want to use it for, and then just having curious and interested and people who are just interested in what we can do and pushing what we can do with those things really makes a big difference for us.
Great.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just jump in. So the way our product delivery teams are set up as kind of these self-sufficient cross-functional teams where we have representation from product engineering and design kind of all working very closely together, so they can really kind of own a certain problem space and take really take that from end to end, from idea to delivery and iteration and beyond. So our ideal is to kind of structure in a way so that we have a mobile engineer across all the different teams, to have a mobile engineer within each team so that every team kind of has that representation. That's not actually the case today. This is, just a function of us growing and having, certain spots that are not filled. So shameless plug, if you are an iOS engineer, please let us know if you're interested in learning more. But once we do have that representation on every team, it'll allow all of us to kind of think through the full gamut of like the product ecosystem and how users will use a feature across all platforms. We're not only a mobile company; we have a web component that's very complementary as well. But when we're building new features, right, like we need to be considerate of kind of having a cohesive experience and making sure that all the different platforms will work really well with each other and give people ultimately that great experience no matter which platform they use.
Yeah, we're at Hyatt, we're structured a little more similarly to the way Ren was describing, and to give a sense of how we've sort of set up our teams, we divide into portfolios, and portfolios are each responsible for like a key section of the guest journey. So the guest journey is what we use as an overarching sort of guide, because we believe that it's important not just to organize around like a particular piece of technology or a particular part of infrastructure, but really thinking about how do all the pieces of technology need to come together for the guest in the moment that they are in. So we've used that as the guiding philosophy. And then there's, small lean agile teams, usually in the neighborhood of anywhere from like 8 to 12 people that are working on a more, discrete section within that portfolio. So I mentioned check-in. We have a team that is literally called digital check-in, and they are thinking about that moment in time in the journey. And there's a whole host of technologies that they, build, and a set of microservices that they manage and build out and share with other teams to actually leverage as well. And within each of those teams, we have a lead for design, a lead for product, and a lead for engineering. And they are leaders of that team, and they are driving all the decisions that ultimately are going to be happening about what comes next in their sequencing and helping to think through the roadmap. They act as leaders of other folks within that team, and then we try to have Android, iOS, and web development live together within those teams as well.
Awesome. That's great to have even leaders within multiple teams, giving people the opportunity to take that leadership role upon themselves. And how your guys' teams are kind of spread out, it's what we're seeing at Embrace as well. Very much feature focus as well as stability. Some teams have a stability team and then a feature focused team to make sure, one, the app works, but also the app is super interesting to the users as well as they continue to use the app over time. To make these features kind of come to life, are there any specific tools or processes, getting more down to a tactical sense, that you guys implement on your day-to-day, trying to share some tools out there for people who are listening to say like, oh, I've never heard of that. It doesn't have to be just Embrace. I'm not trying to make this a product pitch, but other tools that you guys might use that are helpful for your teams.
Yeah, we've got a whole host. I'll start with, we use Jira and the suite of tools around there to really, because we're broken up into different teams, you have to deal with dependencies, right? It's a natural part of any especially any larger organization. It's just going to be a fact of life. And we rely heavily on that tool in order to make sure that we can, manage our releases across multiple teams that are all contributing to a single app. Because an app at the end of the day is really a monolith, right? And we can't get away from that. We would love to, but it's the fact of the world that we have to live in. So that helps us bring it all together and is a really critical set of capabilities there. One of my favorite ones that we've really leaned into very heavily within, I'll call it COVID times in 2020, is a tool called Mural. Mural is essentially an interactive whiteboarding tool, if you haven't used it. And it's just dead simple in the sense that you can invite a whole bunch of people, get in and create something together. And it's not that you're building code. This is really for facilitating anything from a workshop to an ideation session to just, plotting out. We use it for actually our roadmaps now. We realize that it's actually a wonderful way to have an infinitely scalable canvas where we can put all of our teams and all of their work and what's coming up next and what's been accomplished and achievements and things like that, all on a single board, and just show out one link and anybody can see what's going on. There's no question as to who's working on what. Mural helps us really in our product focus that way. And we've tried, I've probably tried a dozen tools over the years, and there's some that are very product, manager focused, and they're kind of overkill. They require so much time to, really get it set up well that you've lost all your time to actually build product. Now you just have a fancy roadmap. Mural gives us a really lightweight and easy way to get that perfect balance, or at least it's been the best tool that we found so far for that. So we really, really love it, and it's become a lifesaver when we're not all literally around a single whiteboard. So we do our retros in it, all that kind of stuff. I'll plug Embrace a little bit too. Embrace has become very quickly a key part of our tool set to just have that proactive monitoring and alerting to let us know, when something is really going wrong. And, inevitably it happens. I always tell the team that it's not about who introduced it or anything. It's not about finger pointing. It's just about, the maturity of a team is measured in how we respond to issues when we are aware of them and how quickly we can be aware of them. And that's really what that tool helps us to do, is just, be super mature in the way that we react to issues and things that inevitably come up in production.
Awesome. I haven't heard of Mural before, but that sounds awesome, like a great tool.
I'll piggyback off of that and definitely +1 on Miro, and obviously Jira too. It's hard to find a software company these days that's not using Jira in some capacity, but I feel like now that remote work is again becoming such a norm, that tools like Miro and Miro's seen a lot of adoption. I know. I think those tools will definitely become more the norm. My spin on this question is a little bit more kind of philosophical, right? There are tons and tons of great tools out there, but I think the two pillars from a philosophical standpoint that I really want to talk about are the data and insights is one, and then also platform stability, right? So from both a product and an engineering standpoint, kind of both groups really want to know when something is going to go wrong in the platform, right? Because that affects users and in their actual usage of the products. And they both want to quantify that effect, understand how important, like how severe the issue is, and then how your platform is hopefully reacting to some good growth and as you proceed to your tech debt as well. So I think it's especially helpful because these tools they're used internally by like an engineering team or by a product team, but you also need insights to be able to justify some of the decisions that you're making to your stakeholders, right? So a lot of times it comes down to a simple prioritization exercise of, hey, do we kind of build more features, or do we kind of focus on some of our tech debt, fix some bugs? And if you don't really have good data on kind of what's going on and what the effect of some of that tech debt is, then it's going to be a hard time convincing stakeholders and convincing leadership that it's worth the time. So I would definitely advise people who are on the product engineering side to definitely leverage tools to help you tell a story and help provide that data and evidence back to the rest of the organization. And again, same thing as Ben, I'll plug Embrace for sure. We're actually not even using Embrace yet at Cohesion, but I've definitely had great experiences with it at previous companies. It's an amazing tool that does a good job of both, right? Kind of providing that data and also kind of providing that monitoring. So it definitely fits kind of both buckets, and there's not a lot of tools that will do both. Sometimes you have to kind of combine multiple tools for that purpose, but Embrace is a great one-stop shop.
Oh, Peter, I think you're muted.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think from our side, same kind of thing. We've tried any number of project management software over the years. Right now, we use just something very simple. We use Asana, but we use it very simply. We use it real simple as a sort of a board system. We use, it's interesting, in the old days, we all sit very close to each other, generally speaking. So it was pretty, we kept the overhead very low. I like what Ben said, which I think is with a lot of these systems, the system can become a thing of itself and it takes over. And I think we've tried really hard to not use anything that takes more time to manage and maintain than the work that is getting done. And so that was pretty easy when we all sat near each other. But I think as we've started working from home, then we've had to find new ways. And I think So from that project management standpoint, it's required a little more overhead when we're not all sitting next to each other and can't all look at the same board. We can't all do some of those things, literally and physically. But I think, like Ren said, I think there are some great tools for monitoring for data. I think the data is key. So we use various analytic services that we use. We use reporting services to help try to pull all those things into one place and have a dashboard that we can look to and that other people can look to, both for the performance of the site and also for success metrics that we track from people that they're using. So right now, like I said, probably so many different we've tried, but right now one that Ancestry uses quite a bit, so we use is Tableau, just so that people have the same place they can go and see those reports and get sort of a pulse on what's going on. We've really enjoyed Embrace. I guess we've been using you guys for about a year, and particularly for the mobile apps, right? But it's been really helpful for us to quickly evaluate where bugs are. There's so many different versions of an OS out there, so many different devices that Embrace really helps you to quickly pinpoint where that problem is. We test as much as we can, but once you get it out in the real world and you have thousands and thousands of people using it, then you see these odd cases, and Embrace has really helped us to much more quickly find and fix some of those things that come up. So anyway, yeah, lots of tools, just kind of depends. But again, for us, we try to keep the overhead down because it just can gum up the wheels as you're trying to move things forward. So
keeping it simple, I like it. So coming back to innovating and creating new features, how do you listen to your customers and bring in their feedback into your product roadmap? And then how do you prioritize what features to work on when?
Well, I'm warmed up from my last talking, so I'll continue.
Love it.
But we do a few things. So we have various sources where people can leave feedback on the site. And then the whole team has access to those, either through, some of them come into an email box that we can all access, others of them come to a sort of a database that we can look at. We have a beta group that we will go out to and send out, we'll as we build a new feature, we'll send out to the beta group a way to how to try to access that and then give them a specific place where they can give us that feedback. We also do we try to do, not always, and it's been harder with COVID, but try to do kind of a weekly listening session where we'll get someone on the line and we'll all get them on a Zoom call, get them to share their screen. We can watch them use the site or the app and watch them, and whether we're testing a particular new feature or whether we'll just do a listening for that week, whatever that may be. So, but our goal is to kind of just gather the feedback that way. And then there are lots of ways that people contact us that we didn't ask them to contact us. So there are social media channels that people use. There are, in the genealogy world, there are blogs and places where people will post things, complaints and so forth. And we try to stay on top of some of those, listen and get that feedback.
It sounds like you really put the customer first and really listening to all different streams that are coming through as far as communication about feedback from the app. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll say a lot of similar things to what Peter, mentioned. I think, some of those like organic social channels, be it, through Reddit or in our case, the Flyer Talks and all the other forums where people gather and talk about this stuff. We try to make sure that we're active and listening in there because sometimes the most honest and brutal and needed feedback is coming in those places. And we like to try to stay on top of that, try to, talk to them and be a part of that community because, these people are really passionate. They're the power users. They're sometimes the very best, guests and customers that you have. So, pay close attention there. They know it as well as sometimes your own testing teams. You'd be surprised. I'll say, we really believe in, especially just, within design thinking, like, a lot of the practices around bringing customers, bringing guests into our process early and often before we've even written a single line of code. That's a really important thing for us because we know that, for all the great ideas that we think we have, a lot of them are going to turn out to be, duds when you put it in front of somebody. It just doesn't resonate. They don't get it. They don't understand it. And it's so important to be able to kind of toss those things to the side or to iterate on them quite a bit before we ever get to a point where it's too hard to say, like, we can't turn back and change that or pivot to something new. So, user testing and even just, really concept testing even before and prior to that is really, really critical. And we make sure that we're doing user testing early and often with, as low a fidelity prototype as we possibly can, to make sure that, it's worthwhile testing, of course, but that's a huge part of our process. And then also, in our case, listening to the field, and the field for us is our 1,000+ properties with, tens of thousands of colleagues out there. They hear, everything firsthand, whereas we're often trying to listen through tools. And the tools are important, and we have them there, but hearing it directly from another human being and letting them synthesize, what they see as the insights and things coming from guests and what's needed that maybe we're not delivering on so well. Those are things that we try to stay close to and make sure that they are just as much, as I say it to them, they're just as much part of the digital team, as anybody that's working with in our group, whether they're an engineer, a designer, or product manager. Try to embrace it that way.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the stuff that Peter and Ben have said. For me, again, at a high level, I think it's about having a good balance between collecting qualitative and quantitative feedback. So, qualitative feedback being, going directly to the end user or to the customer, and really, just getting in their world a little bit more, understanding how they think and not just what they're saying, but seeing more deeply into what are kind of the underlying problems that they're trying to solve and really trying to tease that out of them, understand their day-to-day, their motivations. On the quantitative side, it's about, how do you kind of scale up your data collection, right? How do you know kind of what people are doing inside your applications or in general at scale, and kind of validating that at scale as well. So, example of that would be, sending surveys, right? It might seem like it's a kind of a mix of qualitative and quantitative, but if you do it at scale, you can kind of collect a lot of data and parse all of that and kind of understand where people are generally kind of divided up and what they think is important. But also, having good data analytics structures in place so that you're monitoring behavior inside your applications. On the qualitative front, obviously user research, right? Like there's a full gamut of all the different techniques that you can use to really get a lot of good user feedback and make sure that you're solving the right problem before, again, like Ben said, before ever, even thinking about writing a line of code, right? Just a lot of validation up front. And then, as you're building the product too, right? You can test prototypes and you can test kind of like MVPs to make sure that you're going in the right direction, that you still have time to make incremental kind of adjustments here and there as you go too. And then, in terms of like setting up a team structure to help with that, it's really important. Like we're a B2B business, so we get a lot of big clients who it's hard to maybe see exactly what they're doing from a quantitative standpoint, but we have teams who kind of interact with these big clients all day long, whether they're an existing client or they're a prospective client. So just making sure that the product team has regular touch points with kind of like our customer success function for existing clients, as well as the sales team for prospective clients, to really hear kind of what's going on in the front lines and hear directly from customers what they're thinking about and what's important to them.
Yeah, absolutely. We're B2B, of course, as well. And hearing what our customers or how are they using the product and what they would need out of a mobile tool, we really try to incorporate that into our product roadmap. And we workshop different features and functionality with another team. I know some part of our dashboard, each different feature, one mobile team helped us create that, and then we'll get some iterations going back and forth with them, and then getting a larger user base, inviting 20 people into kind of a Zoom call to kind of pick it out and kind of make more suggestions on how can we make this better, how can we make this more useful. So totally resonate with that, Red. Last question. Thanks for all who's listening, and if you kept on listening this whole time, thank you for sticking with us through the end. My last question is for people listening, Ren, Peter, Ben, what would your advice be for people working on their own mobile initiatives, whether that's creating a product roadmap or executing on different features? Any advice out there for maybe new product folks or experienced product folks that need some little bit of more inspiration while working from home?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with that. So it's just again, some very high level advice. I think mobile as a topic, right? When people hear that word, they get a certain kind of emotional, kind of mental picture in their head, and it can be a very flashy. It can be like a very shiny object, right? And I think a lot of people say, "Hey, we need mobile. Hey, we want mobile," and mobile is going to be the thing that takes us over the top. I would just say, make sure that you really think about like when's the right time to go down that route. And for a lot of companies, that's that they're mobile first. It needs to be right away. For a lot of companies, it's complementary, or for very specific purpose that will accentuate an existing product, right? But it's got to be the right time. It's got to really make sense for your company, for your team, right? Do you have the team that can support it, and for your customer? So does it truly solve does it truly add an extra dimension? Does it truly solve an important problem for all three of those parties? And assuming the answer is yes, and you validated that goal and that value, then you need to think about kind of the constraints, right? Because it's hard to kind of get it off the ground. There are a lot of things that will be kind of helpful to maybe take some incremental steps and some shortcuts. So from a tech standpoint, for example, do you go native or do you go hybrid, right? So native maybe being a longer term investment, and hybrid being something that you can stand up a little bit more quickly with some some drawbacks and some constraints there. But all of these things, it's a good thing that there are a lot of potential options out there, because you can try to find something that really works well for your company and your specific situation. There's no kind of like one size fits all approach. Just because someone else is going mobile doesn't mean you have to, right? So from that standpoint, just make sure that you're doing something that makes sense and is specific to your context. And you can talk to people who've kind of gone through the similar situation that you have, and ask them what they regret, what they wish they would have known back when they were getting started as well. So.
Yeah, I'll add on to what Ren said, because I totally agree. It kind of fits under this bucket heading of like, are we creating an app for the right reasons? And I always like to say that the first thing you have to start with is go to your customers and ask them, would they install an app with your brand on it? Because there's really, that people don't, we live in a world where the web and apps are both, important. There's a lot of overlap, and there's going to be endless debates about, should these be exactly the same? Should they be different? How should they be different? Our strategy at Hyatt has been, play to each channel's strengths, because the differences, although there are more similarities than the differences are really meaningful. And there's certain things, for example, digital key that we use to unlock doors, something we can only do in an app. We cannot do it on the web. So we really focus on those differences and making sure that those experiences are front and center. And that's why we have an app. We also know that our best guests, our best members, are the people who are most likely to, go to the app. And we really focus on what are their needs and how are they different, potentially from somebody who may only stay with us perhaps once a year, because that guest is unlikely to, give up real estate, carve it out on their phone, and keep our app on there all the time. It's going to be your best guest. And if you have somebody that is engaging with you on a, really like a weekly basis, that's probably your likely app user. And you really want to understand what are their needs, and are there things that you can do uniquely here, because sometimes the web might actually be a better fit, and it gives you some more freedom. When you sign up to do an app, you are signed up kind of for life, right? There's no such thing as just launching it and sort of letting it live. It will die very quickly, because you need to maintain it. There's a lot of changes within the mobile ecosystem. You have both Apple and Google as sort of the city planners of the mobile world, constantly forcing changes on you. And if you aren't prepared to be able to respond to those, you will quickly find that your app is going to break. And it can be a real problem. I've seen smaller teams really struggle with that, not knowing before they got in.
Sorry, muted again. Yeah, so I would just totally echo what Ben and Ren said. I think, we've all had the experience of using an app and thinking and realizing the power that's available of having that on your phone, the things that you can do because of an app. I mean, I don't know what your app of choice is, right? But the ability to have those location services help you, the ability to have it so quick and so convenient on the phone. There are things that an app can do that nothing else can. But I do think it's really critical that you decide if what you're doing is one of those things, because if it's not, you're going to waste a lot of time. There's a lot of overhead, and to maintain that is a challenge. So figuring out what it is, the shininess of the app is no substitute for a solid idea, something that's really meaningful, that's really going to make a difference, that people really want to do. So I would just say, make sure you test that really solidly before you get started, that you know that people are interested in doing what you're doing, and then just be open to the possibilities of what the additional functionality of the app can do. Because if you're not going to take advantage of any of those, then there's probably a better way to go. And then I think the other thing that I think came up in what both of them said is, the customer who will be using the app may very well be quite different from the customer who's using something else. So it's critical that you separate those out and have in your own head, what's this app going to do and who's going to use it, versus what's the website going to do and who's going to use that. Really important that they play well together, but you got to keep them separate in the right times as well, or you can end up messing up both, right? You'll build something that doesn't work very well in either situation because you haven't segmented well and you haven't made the right decisions for each of those two platforms, because they are pretty different. But there, there's great power, and there's just really a lot of fun that can be done with apps. It's just making sure that you've got the right fit, you've got an idea, and that you take advantage of the benefits of the app, opportunities, I guess, that are available through the extra power that you can get there. So.
Yeah, I'd add one more thing, just as Peter was saying that, sorry, that, fall in love with the platforms that you choose to develop for, is one thing I would say. I've seen a lot of teams that, they get kind of ego, kind of drives their decisions, and they create something that is very specific to their brand, but doesn't feel native to the platform on which it's operating. And one of the beauties of actually developing an app in a lot of ways is that Apple and Google give you these wonderful SDKs that give you all the building blocks, that use the same patterns and conventions that the user would find in all of the native apps that they would typically use on that platform. Use those. Don't try to create your own Legos. Assemble the Legos that are already given to you, because it just makes for a much easier app to use at the end of the day. So people are more likely to convert and find success with your application, rather than trying to go out and say, I need to build something that just screams my brand and needs to look identical across iOS and Android. Like that's not a good strategy. And it's one that I've seen a lot of people make when they sometimes are getting into apps for the first time. So fall in love with the platforms that you develop for.
Yep, and like Peter said, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it if you don't need it to be. Amazing advice. Thank you, Ren, Peter, and Ben, for taking the time to share your knowledge of working in this space for many, many years. I'm sure our listeners have loved getting that advice and hoping to incorporate it into their own teams. Colin, is there any questions from the listeners from Q&A that they'd like to ask the panelists?
Yeah, so we have a couple questions, and if anyone is thinking of any questions as they digest all this wonderful material, feel free to send them in chat. But yeah, I'll start with the ones we have, and I think this first one our guests are going to relate to. The question is, how often does it happen that new features take way longer than expected, and how do you handle balancing that with maintaining your roadmap?
I'm happy to start with that. So the answer is all the time. And it's hard because we've actually spent a lot of time really thinking, what does an agile product roadmap look like? Because it's not a traditional roadmap. Traditional roadmap being like the Gantt chart with a clearly defined start and end date where we're going to say this is when we're going to deliver something. But that's waterfall, right? Like that is tried and true waterfall. And if you're trying to be agile, that you may start something that may never actually see the end, or it might dramatically change partway through. So we've been experimenting with this, and it's always a kind of a we're always kind of trying to tweak and test different ways of doing this. But we have this little gradient effect that we show on our roadmap, and it basically the longer the gradient, the more uncertainties there are with that particular feature or that capability, and it speaks to the fact and it communicates to stakeholders that this thing might have some surprises. We don't know exactly where it's going to end. Hopefully it's done sooner than what we think, but it's going to taper off at some point, and it's got kind of a longer, it's just got more uncertainties and more things that we're going to find out as we dive into it. Some of them, a lot of knowns. We have a very good sense of how we're going to tackle this thing, and it's got a very, short gradient, so to speak, when we represent it visually. That's, I think a great way to try to just communicate ultimately those things that we just don't know, and that's part of what we do. I think after that, it's really just about it's prioritization, right? Making sure that which item is coming naturally after those. And as long as we have the right priorities in place, then ultimately if something takes a little bit longer, there was a good reason for it. It wasn't because it was easy to do, it was because it was going to have the greatest impact if we could achieve it.
So I'll add on and say, I'm pretty sure every single product person you talk to is going to tell you that everything always takes longer than you expect it to. And I think that's partially because as you really get into doing something, as you learn more about it, kind of that's when things become, incrementally clearer, and you think of new directions to take the product, or, something unexpected comes up in terms of the complexity of it. And that's the game that we're playing here. That's, the industry that we're in. Software is very hard to predict up front. But, some tactics to help with that are kind of, slicing things into smaller and smaller parts to kind of say, hey, well, this entire feature might be a huge unknown, but if we can kind of, reduce it down to some parts, or, we can kind of say, what's the very minimum amount that we need to build to get something out, to test it and learn from it, that helps you, contain some of those unknowns a little bit more. And again, as you get it out there, as you learn, then you might decide, okay, well, this isn't, quite what we expected. We want to actually move on to the next thing faster. Or maybe you might learn, hey, this is really something very, very special, maybe surprising in a way, and it deserves more priority. So that goes back to the second part of the question about the roadmap, right? I think it's really useful to establish upfront that the roadmap is not just a clear list of things, like when we're done with this and we go on to the next thing. These are, general, goals and in roughly order of importance. So if you kind of establish that with stakeholders kind of upfront, right? Because the whole goal is not to have a perfect list of stuff. The whole goal is to make sure you're delivering the most value at any point in time. And if tomorrow we realize that we could be delivering more value somewhere else, we should not let the roadmap constrain us from doing that. So, so it's all, kind of this feedback loop, and, making those feedback loops as small and tight as possible will help you kind of, make sure you're always delivering the most value at any point in time.
Yeah, and I'd agree completely. I think, as I think Ben mentioned earlier and Ren alluded to there, I think you want to test early, you want to test often, and you want to be flexible, because you may find something in your testing that is more valuable than what you originally thought. It's important that you have a mission, that you know what you are, and that because sometimes those things will try to pull you off that. So you want to be anchored to what's really central and core to what you do. But knowing that, I think you want to be flexible, because as you get out there with an early phase of something and you test and you get in front of people, you may discover an idea or a use that you never thought of that maybe that has great potential. So I think, yeah, in my experience, most projects, the best projects take longer than you expected, because you find something you didn't know and you try something new, and then you move in a slightly different direction that ends up somewhere great. And I think you have to balance that, and that will depend a lot on your leadership team and how you manage that, and how you speak to them. But I do think that it's your roadmap. As soon as your roadmap begins to dictate, then you lose some potential, I think. So you want to be careful that you balance that roadmap with what you learn from your testing and the pleasant diversions that you might find, as long as you can stay core to what you are.
I'll also add, it just reminded me of one thing. Yeah, try not to roadmap too far beyond like 2 quarters. I find that typically within software, anything in that third or fourth, it's an exercise on paper of just wasting time. That seems scary, and I know a lot of companies always want to budget on an annual cycle, and I think Agile is really challenging that in a lot of ways, because it's just you don't want to be fully committed for a year out, because to Peter's point, you're going to find things along the way that are going to change those priorities. And if we don't have that flexibility, ultimately we're missing, even greater opportunities typically.
Sometimes you just got to go with the flow. Colin, are there any other questions from our audience today? We can probably fit in one more, and then we'll wrap this webinar up.
I was going to say, Leah, I think we got time for one quick one, so I'll throw this one out there because this one's very interesting to me as well, which is, how many features are you working on at any given period of time?
Maybe I'll go first on this one. It sounds like maybe our team is smaller than the other teams being represented here, so we keep it pretty simple. We try to focus. In an iteration, we may be fixing a few bugs and adding a little thing, but as far as major features at any given time, we really try to focus on 1 or maybe 2 that we do, just because we have a small group and So yeah, so for us, we try to keep that small and focused. And again, we may mix in some smaller little things where we're fixing something or making a tweak here, but as far as actual features, we keep it to 1 to 2 maybe at a time.
Yeah, I've allowed my teams to kind of operate, in the way that they kind of want, whether it comes to, some are running Kanban, where they're just kind of biting off the most important thing and taking it on. And, however many, engineers or design, folks are needed there, like they kind of, rally around that particular thing until they see it through to the point that they're happy with it. Others are running more of a kind of a 2-week sprint cadence. We do actually, we release our app every 2 weeks. It's actually a whole nother topic we could talk about, but yeah. I think we try to limit it. We try to keep it as simple and as focused as possible, but it's usually probably in the neighborhood of 1 to 3 at any given time. And that's kind of on a per team basis. So yeah, you wouldn't want to, with more teams, you can obviously take in a lot more, but within a team, you don't want to try to have it too fragmented.
So the way that we're structured at Cohesion right now, we have 3 teams that are kind of running in parallel. So, there's at least 3 things that are going on at any point in time. And there's no like hard and fast rule, because everything that you're working on is, of different sizes and shapes and different types of features as well. But, ultimately it's kind of up to those teams to decide how much they can kind of take on at any point in time. And, I think most people gravitate towards, keeping it simple, trying to focus on one thing at a time, because context switching and just, having multiple things that you're juggling tends to be counterproductive, right? To kind of like flip back and forth between things. So, it's very helpful. Like that's why we kind of set up the structure the way that we do, right? To have kind of these teams that run in parallel. They can take, different areas of the product or different, different features. So that they can really have that ownership from beginning to end of those things. And when you have a group of people who all have like the skill set that are needed to kind of come together and build a really good product, and you give them that focus, you give them that direction, and then they can actually take time to really think through the problem the right way. That's when kind of the magic happens. That's when really good products get built. So overwhelming them just to say that you're working on more things at a certain point in time, or to have the hope of maybe moving things quicker is usually counterproductive to that end goal of building that really great product.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining today. Thank you especially to our panelists, Peter, Ren, and Ben, for taking the time out of your Thursday to come chat a little bit about product innovation with Embrace. We really do appreciate it. This webinar will be recorded, so if any of your team members do want to kind of listen in, you'll have that recording. But if anyone listening or listening to the recording has questions for our panelists, you can email them to me. My email is megan@embrace.io. Megan spelled the normal way of MEGAN. And then we'll get those to the panelists as fast as we can. So thank you guys again. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Colin and Anton, for setting it up. And we'll see you soon for our next webinar in December. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having us, Megan.
Thanks very much.